A very good afternoon to one and all. I, Swati Rai, along with Professor Alisha Thomas, Professor Nakul Singh Chauhan, moderators for today's session, Professor Gopal Kar and Professor Sayali Bandi, coordinators for the event, welcome you all to the fifth day of 7 days National Faculty Development Program 2020 on the theme Expected Nuances in Laws Post-COVID-19, organized by the Department of Law, Prestige Institute of Management and Research in Law. We have forever heard health is wealth, but we believe it now. In the present scenario, amid the chaos and the panic of COVID-19 pandemic, each one of us is very much concerned about the health and safety of our family and friends. In such a scenario, right to health guaranteed under the Constitution of India has become a very significant right. It is thus imperative and daunting for all of us to explore and understand the nuances of right to health amidst COVID-19 pandemic. We are delighted and fortunate to have among us our distinguished guest, Professor Dr. Anand Paliwal, Dean School of Law, Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur, to share with us his valuable insights on the topic for today's session, Right to Health amidst COVID-19 pandemic. I now request Professor Alisha Thomas to extend a warm welcome.
In today's session of FDP, we are delighted to have amongst us Dr. Anand Paliwal. He is affiliated to Department of Law, Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur. He is currently Dean and Chairman of Faculty of Law, Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur. He is the Chairman of University Sports Board, Visitors Nominee and Court Member in Central Universities, Member of Board of Studies in different state universities, Member of Board of Management, has been Finance Committee member and Dean Students Welfare also. Dr. Anand Paliwal has authored and co-authored multiple peer-reviewed scientific papers and presented works at many national and international conferences. Sir's contribution had acclaimed recognition from honorable subject experts around the world. He has published several books and guided many research scholars for PhD work. He has also delivered extension lectures, published numerous research articles in various journals, and he is actively associated with different societies and academies. Dr. Anand Paliwal's academic career is decorated with several reputed awards and funding. He was a gold medalist in his graduate LLB course as well as first position holder in LLM. He is recipient of prestigious Bhamasha Award, Devang Mehta Award, and Dainik Bhaskar Award. He has delivered extension lectures in Officers Training Institutes, UGC refresher programs, Police Training Institute, etc. He has undertaken major research project of ICSSR. He was interviewed for legal education in 21st century by All India Reporter magazine. Dr. Anand Paliwal's research interests include constitutional law. We welcome you, sir.
Sir, we would now request you to please proceed with your session.
So, I thanks to the Prestige Institute of Management and Research, Department of Law, for giving me an opportunity to share my views on this topic, right to health amidst COVID-19. And my greetings to all the faculty, to all the scholars who have joined this faculty development program, which is being organized by the Pacific Institute of Management and Research. So, while speaking on this topic, that is right to health amidst COVID-19, I first want to state that this right to health, we all know, is a fundamental right. So before elaborating on this right to health, I will also speak on the fundamental right. I will also speak on certain articles stating directive principles which relates to right to health. So overall, how the Constitution, how this fundamental right is acting as a shield in this pandemic, I will try to focus on all these aspects and also the judgments and also I should say, the initiatives that has been taken by the Honorable High Court and the Supreme Court for for honoring the fundamental rights that we should have a look while going and having a discussion on this topic. So when we talk for this right to health, or when we speak of this right to health, this is a fundamental right. And fundamental rights, if we speak, what are fundamental rights? Fundamental rights are that rights which are very essential for human beings, basic requirements, natural and inalienable rights of freedom. And these rights preserve the human liberty. The fundamental right is necessary for effective and social and democratic life, and also to develop human personality. When we are born as a human being, we are blessed with these fundamental rights. And the Indian Constitution is there to protect these fundamental rights. The Constitution never speaks of providing these fundamental rights. This is available to us as soon as we take the birth as a human beings. The Constitution come and protect these fundamental rights. When we go for the Ajay Hasia judgment, in which the Supreme Court has observed that it must be remembered that the fundamental rights are constitutional guarantees given in the people of India and are not merely paper or fleeting promises. They are not paper hops or fleeting promises. And so long as they find a place in the Constitution, they should not be allowed to be emasculated in their application by a narrow and constricted judicial interpretation. And when we speak for this right to health, I want to say that this is implied fundamental rights, means this is not being expressly stated as fundamental rights. And when we go by the Supreme Court judgment in the famous Unnikrishnan case, in which the Supreme Court has even enunciated the doctrine of implied fundamental rights, the court has asserted that in order to treat a right as a fundamental right, it is not necessary that it should be. It should be expressly stated in the Constitution as a fundamental right. Political, social and economic changes occurring in the country may entail the recognition of new rights, and the law in its eternal youth grows to meet social demands. So this right to health come under the perception of the this implied fundamental rights, and now we all know that it has now been accepted, this right to health as a fundamental right. Here I want to focus on the two aspects that has arrived when we talk of this right to health. One is the case of Gujarat and another is the case of Telangana. I mean, in Gujarat, the question that was raised was the private hospital, when they deny to treat the COVID-19 patients on the ground that who is going to bear the financial expenses of the persons whom they are going to be treated. In Telangana, what happened that the government ordered that all the COVID-19 patients will be treated in the government hospitals only. They are not going to be treated by the private hospitals. So in these two cases, the two different aspects of right to health came in question before the Honorable High Courts. First, we come to the Telangana High Court. Telangana High Court, first the government say, okay, the private hospitals, they can go and treat the COVID-19 patients. But later on, the order was withdrawn and it was stated that they will be treated only in the government hospitals. The patients who are undergoing the treatment, they challenge the same. They state that this right to health is their fundamental right and it is for them to decide in each hospital they want the treatment, by which doctor they want to be treated. They cannot be forced that you just go and get yourself treated in the government hospital. So when they challenge the same, they again challenge the same under Article 21 and this right to health, and stating that this is their fundamental right and therefore they have their own choice of being treated, and if they don't want to be treated in the government hospitals, they cannot be forced to go for the same treatment. So the fundamental rights are not at all distinct and mutually exclusive rights. Each of these freedom has a different dimensions, and a law may have to meet the challenge under various fundamental rights. So the Telangana High Court decided, yes, this is their fundamental rights, and if they want to be treated in the private hospital, they have a choice of going for the private hospitals, and they cannot be forced to be treated in the government hospital. So in this way, the right to health, which was stated there under Article 21, has been honored, has been taken care of well by the Telangana High Court. So these fundamental rights are intended not only to protect the individual rights, but they are based on high public policy. Liberty of the individual and protection of fundamental rights are very essence of the democratic ways of life adopted by the Constitution, and it is the privilege and the duty of the court to uphold these rights. Therefore, the court would naturally refuse to circumscribe them or to curtail them except as provided by the Constitution itself. It was stated by the Telangana High Court while delivering the judgment in the favor of the petitioners and stating that they have the option to be treated by the doctor of their own choice. In India, if you want to discuss, we know that India, we are having a written constitution, and in written constitution, it provides the fundamental law, and that the laws enacted by the legislature cannot transgress or violate the provisions of that fundamental law. It is called fundamental because it sets up the very organs of the governments which are invested with the powers to make ordinary laws and to administer them. And also because the law embodied in the written constitution cannot be changed by the ordinary legislation in the manner of ordinary legislation. Constitutional law is, if I want to say, constitutional law is a species of the generic term constitution, and fundamental rights is from that constitutional law which is directly enforceable in a court of law. So in this pandemic situation, not only this right to health, but right to health indirectly, whether it's a question of shelter homes, whether it's a question of migrant laborers, whether it's a question of migrant laborers going to their home, whether it's a question of the food, shelter, quarantine where they're being quarantined. I mean, everywhere, this right to health is a question. Right to health is coming in question. Means where the people are challenging that under Article 21, this right to health is a fundamental right, and it should be very well taken care of. So in Telangana High Court, the High Court ordered in the favor of the petitioners, and petitioners, while stating for the particular relief, relies on Article 21 of the Constitution of India and contends that the said article guarantees of the fundamental right to life and personal liberty, which includes the right of person to choose his own doctor and hospital, and therefore it was the matter was decided in their favor, and this right was very well honored. If we go to some previous judgment like Devika Viswas versus Union of India, which was delivered in the year 2016, here the Supreme Court reiterated a stated position, legal position of right to health. It is a facet of the right to life guaranteed by Article 21 of Constitution of India, and it was held by the Honorable Supreme Court that it is a well established that the right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution of India includes right to lead a dignified and meaningful life, and right to health is an integral facet of this right. So this has been stated by the Supreme Court in Devika Viswas versus Union of India. Further, there were two similar cases on the same aspects. One was that of Subhash Chandra Bose in 1992, and another was of Paschim Bengal Khet Mazdoor Samiti. It was in the year 1996. And the Honorable Court, while dealing with the right to health of workers, noted that the right to health must be considered as an aspect of social justice, informed by not only Article 21 of the Constitution, but also the directive principles of state policy and international covenants to which India is a party. Similarly, the bare minimum obligations of the state to ensure the preservation of the right to life and health were enunciated in these judgments. In Bandhwa Mukti Morcha case also, the Supreme Court underlined the obligations of the state to ensure that the fundamental rights of the weaker sections of the society are not to be exploited owing to their positions in the society. So it is for the state to take care of the fundamental rights. It is for the state to take care of the right to health. It is for the state who made such a mechanism that even a person who cannot afford the medical, who cannot afford to bear the burden, to bear the financial burden of the medical expenses, it is for the state there to come and play the role as a welfare state, that the person should not be deprived of the medical treatment, the person should not be deprived of his fundamental right to health only on the account because he is financially not capable of bearing the expenses. Then we go for the another judgment of the Supreme Court in the year 2019. It's a latest judgment only, Association of Medical Super Specialty Aspirants and Residents case, in which the Supreme Court had stated that it is the duty of the state to provide all facilities to make meaningful the right of a citizen to secure his health. The Supreme Court has stated it is for the state to secure health to its citizens as its primary duty. No doubt, the government is rendering the obligation by opening government hospitals and health centers. But in order to make it meaningful, it has to be within the reach of its people as far as possible, to reduce the queue of waiting lists. And it has to provide all facilities to employ best of talents and tone up its administration to give effective contribution, which is also the duty of the government. Right to health is integral to right to life. Government has a constitutional obligation to provide health facilities. The fundamental right to life, which is the most precious human right and which forms the arc of all other rights, must therefore be interpreted in broad and expansive spirit so as to invest it with significance and vitality which may endure for years to come and enhance the dignity of the individual and worth of the human persons. The right to life enshrined in Article 21 cannot be restricted to mere animal existence. It means something much more than the physical survival. The right to life includes the right to live with human dignity and all that goes along with it, namely the bare necessities of life such as adequate nutrition, clothing and shelter, and facilities for reading, writing, expressing oneself in diverse form, freely moving and mixing and commingling with other fellow beings. So this was stated by the Supreme Court, and we all know that in the year 2017, when the ADM Jabalpur case was overruled by K.S. Puttaswamy case, here also while expressing the importance of the fundamental rights, what the Supreme Court has stated that is very relevant if I want to speak in this context. Supreme Court linked the same right from the Keswanand Bharti case, and by emphasizing the importance of this right to health, right to life as a fundamental right, has stated certain very important things which I think is very relevant while discussing this right to health in this pandemic situations. The Supreme Court has stated that these rights are primordial rights, and it was stated by the Supreme Court even in the Keswanand Bharti case. So they constitutes under these fundamental rights constitute under natural law. The human element in the life of individual is integrally founded on the sanctity of life. Dignity is associated with liberty and freedom. Neither life nor liberty are boundaries conferred by the state, nor the Constitution creates these rights. The right to life has existed even before the advent of the Constitution. In recognizing the right, the Constitution does not become the sole repository of the right. It would be preposterous to suggest that a democratic constitution without a Bill of Rights would leave individuals governed by the state without either the existence of that right. Apart from it, nor can there be a fatus assumption that in adopting the constitution, the people of India surrendered the most precious aspect of the human persona, namely life, liberty and freedom, to the state on whose mercies these rights would depend. Such a construct is contrary to the basic foundation of the rule of law, which imposes restraint upon the powers vested in the modern state when it deals with the liberties of the individuals. A constitutional democracy can survive when citizens have an undiluted assurance to the rule of law that it will protect their rights and liberties against any invasion by the state, and that judicial remedies would be available to ask searching questions and expect answers when a citizen has been deprived of these most precious rights. The view which was taken by the Honorable Justice Khanna in ADM Jabalpur case has now again been upheld by the Supreme Court in this case, Puttaswamy case. We know that in ADM Jabalpur case, the view which was taken by the Honorable Justice Khanna was in minority, and was not reflected there in the judgment. But in this Puttaswamy case, the view that was taken by the Honorable Justice Khanna has now been upheld. So I mean, when we talk in light of the Constitution of India, we know that there is Article 21, which speaks for the protection of life and personal liberty. Then again, there is an Article 38, which states that the state will secure a social order for the promotion of welfare of the people. The state will provide affordable health care in one of the way to promote welfare. Means promoting affordable health care is the directive principles for the state. Again, in Article 39A, it calls upon the state to make sure that health and strength of workers, men and women, and the tender age of the children are not abused. In Article 41, it imposes duty on the state to provide public assistance in cases of unemployment, age, sickness, and disablement, etc. In Article 41 only, it provides to protect the health of infants and mothers through maternity benefits. Article 47 speaks duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living and to improve public health. The state shall regard the raising level of nutrition and the standard of living of its people and the improvement of public health as among its primary duties. And in particular, the state shall endeavor to bring about prohibition of the consumption, except for medicinal purposes, of intoxicating drinks and of drugs which are injurious to health. Again, in Article 48A, the state shall endeavor to protect and impose a pollution-free environment for good health. Therefore, under the Constitution of India, the state is duty-bound to provide for the standard of living and to improve public health. Further, Article 14 provides for equality before law. Article 15 prohibit that there should not be any discrimination. A number of cases have shown that courts have used these directive principles not only to restrict but rather to expand the ambit of the fundamental rights. When we talk in respect of the implied fundamental rights, which are not been expressly stated, we cannot ignore the role of the directive principles, which have played a great role while emerging the concept of the implied fundamental rights. The theme that fundamental rights are but a means to achieve the goal indicated in the directive principles, and that fundamental rights must be interpreted in the light of the directive principles, has been advocated by the Supreme Court time and again. This integrative approach towards fundamental rights and directive principles, of that both should be interpreted and read together, has now come to hold the field. It has now become a judicial strategy to define the scope and ambit of the fundamental rights along with directive principles. Directive principles have been used to broaden and to give depth to some fundamental rights and to imply some more rights there from the peoples over and above what are expressly stated in fundamental rights. Directive principles are regarded as a dependable index or public purpose. I want to state one very important case of state of Himachal Pradesh versus parent of a student of medical college, Simla, in which the court has stated that where the court finds on being moved by an aggrieved party or by any public spirited individuals or social action group that the executive is remiss in discharging its obligation under the constitution or the law, so that the poor and the underprivileged continue to be subjected to exploitation and injustice or are deprived of their social and economic entitlements, or that social legislation enacted for their benefit is not being implemented, thus depriving them of their rights and benefits conferred upon them, the court certainly can and must intervene and compel the executive to carry out its constitutional and legal obligations. No doubt the court said that the court cannot even indirectly require the executive to introduce a particular legislation or the legislature to pass it or assume to itself a supervisory role over the law making activities of the executive and the legislature. The Supreme Court in Bandhua Mukti Morcha, we all know that it's a very, very important case. The para 14 of that Bandhua Mukti Morcha is very important in this aspect. The poor and the disadvantaged cannot possibly produce relevant material before the court in support of their case, and equally where an action is brought on their behalf by a citizen acting pro bono public, it would be almost impossible for him to gather the relevant material and place it before the court. What is the Supreme Court to do in such a case? Would the Supreme Court not be failing in discharging of its constitutional duty of enforcing a fundamental right if it refuses to intervene because the petitioner belonging to the underprivileged segment of a society or public spirited citizen espousing his cause is unable to produce the relevant material before the court? If the Supreme Court were to adopt a passive approach and to decline to intervene in such a case because relevant material has not been produced before it by the party seeking its intervention, the fundamental right would remain merely a teasing illusion so far as the poor and disadvantaged sections of the community are concerned. The Supreme Court also observed that it is for this reason that the Supreme Court has evolved the practice of appointing commissions for the purpose of gathering facts and data in regard to a complaint of breach of fundamental right made on behalf of the weaker sections of the society. I am stating this. This is also very relevant because when the case in Ahmedabad, in Gujarat, came regarding the right to health, there was some anonymous letters on the basis of which the court was hearing that what is the condition of the patients who are being treated in the government hospitals. There were certain letters that were being stated that there is no proper infrastructure, there is no proper medication facilities, etc. All the things were there. And when it was objected by the government that these letters are anonymous, there is no proof on what basis the court is going to hear the same. So this para 14, which just now I read before you, this para was stated and it was reiterated by the High Court that we are not going to check in details. We are not going for demanding the exact proof from the petitioner. If we think that this is an area which is required to be addressed, we are going to address the same. The private hospitals, we are refusing to treat the patients only on the ground that who is going to bear the burden of the expenses. Then the court says that this is the fundamental right of the patients. You cannot deny them that you are not going to treat them because who is going to bear the financial burden? You have to treat them. And I think because this right to health, which is there as a fundamental right, the duty was cast on the state, the rightful intervention by the Honorable Court, protect the patients for the treatment, protect the patients, their fundamental rights, and the private hospitals were directed to admit the COVID-19 patients, irrespective of taking or irrespective of the concern that who will bear the financial bills and who will repay all these medical expenses. It is for their duty to take care of their citizens. It is a duty of the state because this right to health is a fundamental right. And again, the Moolchand Khairati Ram case is there of 2018. In this, the Supreme Court in the para 72 had stated that the poor cannot be deprived of the treatment by the best physicians due to his economic disability in case he requires it. It is the obligation on the medical professionals, hospitals, the states, and all concerned to ensure that such a person who is economically not capable to bear the expenses given adequate, proper treatment, and the person should be well taken care of, and he should not be deprived of the same because of the poverty. That is what is envisaged in the Constitution also. on the making of a doctor, the state spends and invests a huge amount of public money, and it is the corresponding obligations to serve the needy, and the treatment cannot be refused on the grounds of financial inability of the patient to bear it. It has been observed in para 89 that the hospital nowadays have 5-star facilities. The entire concept has been changed to make commercial gains. They are becoming unaffordable for a normal person, even for a middle class person. The charges are phenomenally high, at times unrealistic to the service provided. The dark side of such hospitals can be illuminated only by sharing obligations towards economically weaker sections of the society. It would be almost inhuman to deny proper treatment to the poor owing only to their economic conditions. Para 64 also states that realization of human rights vests responsibilities upon the state. The state has to constantly make an endeavor for realization of human rights agenda, particularly in relation to economic, social and cultural rights. Right to health is provided in Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights speaks that everyone has a right to a standard living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing and medical care and necessary social service, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. So it is a well-settled position in law that this right to health is a fundamental right which has to be taken care of by the state, by the medical professionals. Reasonableness has to be decided, has to be determined, having regard to the nature of the right alleged to be infringed, purpose of restrictions, extent of restriction, and other relevant factors. In applying these factors, one cannot lose sight of the directive principles of the state policy. The court has always tried to have a balance between the directive principles and the fundamental rights in the larger interest of the society. So this fundamental rights, this directive principles, no, when we talk of the right to health, is there in the rule, whether we are talking of the migrant labor, they are moving from one place to another, whether they are moving in the trains, whether they are being kept in the quarantine centers, in the shelter homes, everywhere, there should be adequate health facilities. There should be adequate health facility for the children. There should be adequate health facilities for the women, for the girls, even for the old persons, for the disabled person, and now it is for the state. And also it is for the medical professionals, because the way, the series of the judgments which the Supreme Court, which the Honorable High Court has given, has repeatedly stated that this right to health is an implied fundamental right. And a person, if he is being deprived of this fundamental rights, he has a right to move to the Honorable High Court or the Honorable Supreme Court. So this right to health, if you talk in another concept also, that this right to health has an interlinking with right to livelihood also, with right to work also, with right to have income also, because income is the foundation of many fundamental rights, because work is a source of income. So when we are talking of this right to health, it is a duty that indirectly that has been casted upon the state, that the migrant labor who have come to their own hometown, they should be provided some work. They should have a source of income. Only then they could provide good nutrition, good food to their family members, to their children's education. And in this way also, the right to health can be taken care of. Because the right to health relates to psychological aspects also. And this right to livelihood is related to right to health in the psychological aspects. If a person is having a livelihood, means of livelihood, if he can provide basic facilities to his family members, obviously this right to health will also be addressed. And we know that the Supreme Court has taken the suo motu cognizance regarding the problems of the migrant laborers. the Supreme Court has also asked from the state that what necessary steps they have taken regarding the migrant laborers who have moved to their hometown, what medical facilities has been provided in the way to them, and what work opportunities are now being provided to them. The Andhra Pradesh High Court also directed the state government to provide shelter homes, to provide adequate medical facilities to all the persons who are moving from one place to another. So the preamble, the fundamental rights and the directive principles, these all can be characterized as the trinity of the Indian Constitution. The Constitution is based on the bedrock of the balance between the directive principles and fundamental rights, and to give appropriate primacy to one over the other would disturb the balance. Fundamental rights and directive principles have to be balanced. That balance should tilt in the favor of the public good, where the preamble states the goals and objects of the constitutions, and from the words in the preamble, it becomes clear that ultimate source for the validity of the sanctions behind the constitution is the will of the people. In the present COVID-19 circumstances, it is for us, that is we, the people, to introspect the fundamental rights along with the fundamental duties, and to respect the fair and reasonable restrictions, and the state should ensure that the directive principles are taken care of while framing the necessary policies. If you look at Article 21, fundamental rights, along with preamble to the Constitution and directive principles, we can sum up that social justice, right to economic justice, economic equality, and economic empowerment of the weaker section of the society constitute fundamental rights. In the present circumstances, the fundamental rights, this right to health, which is again implied fundamental rights, are acting as a shield against all the troubles, pains, sufferings of the COVID-19 epidemic, and to a larger extent mitigating the troubles, pains, and sufferings of all the persons, of the laborers. And so in this way, a very positive role has been played by the Constitution, has been played by the fundamental rights for protecting the individuals, for protecting all the weaker sections of the society. So this is all what I have to state regarding the right to health in this COVID-19 scenario.
Thank you, sir. With your permission, I would now like to move forward with the question and answer session. There have been a few questions that have been posted on the chat box. I will read those questions out for you. Sir, one of the questions is from our moderator, Professor Alicia Thomas. While we can argue that no country in the world can actually be fully prepared to handle an emergency, do you think the time is ripe to push the agenda of healthcare as a fundamental right for all citizens?
Can you please repeat the question? You are not audible to me clearly, Professor Nukul.
Yes, sir. I'll repeat the question, sir. The question is from Professor Alicia, and her question to you is, while we can argue that no country in the world can actually be fully prepared to handle an emergency, do you think the time is ripe to push the agenda of healthcare as a fundamental right for all citizens?
To put the agenda of?
Fundamental rights for all citizens.
No, what I want to state here is that already this right to health has been recognized, has been established as a fundamental right. So here when we speak that we are not putting this as an agenda, it is in the Constitution that this right to health has been settled by the various decisions that it is a fundamental right. And when it is already there, the state cannot escape from its liability that this right to health is not being honored. It is for the state to come to prepare, because we are having a welfare nation concept. We are having a concept of welfare state. So the state has to prepare itself, and this right to health has to be honored because it is a fundamental right. And this is not something which we are placing as an agenda. It is something which is expected from the state. It is something which is expected from the medical professionals. Repeatedly, the Supreme Court has emphasized that only on the basis of economic criteria, only on the basis of some shortfalls, you cannot run away from your duty of taking care of your own citizens. So I think Here, the state has to be prepared. Obviously, there may be some problem that vaccines is not available, that proper treatment is not there, but still to take care of their basic needs is what is required to be addressed by the state.
Thank you for answering this question, sir. Sir, we have another question from our participant, Professor Twinkle Maheshwari. Her question to you is, what is your opinion about the situation in Delhi and about the difference between the state and central orders for the treatment of COVID-19 patients due to lack of beds?
So here I don't want to involve in any type of controversy. I simply want to say is that what I want to speak is what our constitution say, what I expect from my constitution, what right the Constitution of India has given to me. I am simply stating that only, and how these rights has been very well honored by the Honorable Supreme Court. So in this light, I want to say that there should not be any type of politics when we are talking of the healthcare of the citizens. When the nation is fighting against pandemics, there should be united, joint efforts by central and state government to protect each and every life of the citizens. Whether it's the state government, whether it's the central government, we are not concerned. We are simply concerned that this right to health is my fundamental right. It is going to be taken care of irrespective of the government. And if it's their united efforts, it's a welcome step.
Thank you for answering the question, sir. Sir, we have another question. Just give me a moment.
I think Twinkle has again raised that health is a matter of stateless. I really appreciate this. Right, Twinkle, you are very well right that health is a matter of stateless. But in this pandemics, even if the central government is coming with some help to the state government, it should be welcome. I don't think that here this politics should come, and neither the state should go and run to snatch the credit, nor they should say that they are doing this for the advertisement, for the credit. They are doing this because this is their fundamental duty under the Indian Constitution, and they are honoring their duty only by providing adequate health facilities to the citizens.
Okay. So the next question is from another participant of ours. Her name is Dr. Anita Gehlot, and her question to you is, I'll try and basically there's some policy in the question, but I'll try and correct it by myself. So it is a time of pandemic according to her, and health is given differently in the Constitution under Article 21, including right to live and guaranteed. But in Corona, there is no guarantee of life, and in this time, there is no guarantee whether you live or not. So, which law should be applicable more, the Disaster Management Act, the IPC, or the Constitution?
No, sorry, I fail to understand what exactly she is asking here, madam.
Exactly, sir. Even I think there's some problem in the framing of the question. I'll just move on to the last question that we have, and then we can also have a small interactive sessions of the participants and Dr. Paliwal, sir. Sir, the question is, the impact of COVID-19 has shaken even states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu that traditionally did well in the area of healthcare. There has been a great deal of imagination in dispensing healthcare and stretching the limits to cover as many people as possible. Does this give you hope that India can deliver quality healthcare for all? And what range would be sufficient as a percentage of GDP for contribution in healthcare?
So here I think that it is for the Parliament, it is for the Assembly to decide what rate of the GDP they should go for the healthcare, depending on the data, depending on the statistics which will be available to them after this pandemic. I think the appropriate action, appropriate mechanism should be devised by the government so as to address the future issues. Means this is not an end. Means first time we have faced this type of biological threat, and in the coming years there might be certain other viruses also, maybe in any other form. So it is for the government to decide that what percentage of the GDP they should provide in their budget. And I think that on the basis of the statistics, the government will definitely form a very positive policy in the interest of the citizens. However, I think that what we as a citizen can do what we as an individual can do in this COVID-19 circumstances, we should discuss on that. We should deliberate on that. And I think what other means how this is spreading, where we are lacking, and where we are breaching the certain restrictions. Where I want to give an example, like when the COVID-19 was when the COVID-19 came, we all know that there was a judgment, that there was a direction by the court that there should not be any congregation, there should not be any assembly of the person. But despite that, the persons were coming, and it was challenged in the court that why the loudspeakers are being denied on the masjid, why the adhan should not be given on the masjid. The UP High Court come with a very good judgment. They say that okay, you can come, you can give azan in the masjid, but because only of this loudspeaker, if the people are going to assemble, and if there is a apprehension that this COVID-19 super spreader, this assembly can be a super spreader of COVID-19, we are restricting the same. So we should not take the same as against Article 21 or 25, but we should take it that this is there to honor our life under Article 21. So reasonable restrictions when the state government impose, I think there should be awareness regarding the same. When the people are going for like in Tamil Nadu, the super spreader was this market, vegetable markets was a super spreader. The people were defying the conditions, was defying the restrictions that was imposed on them. They were going to mall. Even now, the people are not properly wearing the mask. They are not properly maintaining the social distance. I think we as a legal scholar should focus more on that areas, on that concerns, whether through the legal aid, whether through other mechanism, to make the people aware about these biological threats.
Thank you, sir. So we have another question from a participant, Professor Pavitra Bankar, and her question to you is, in case of violations of right to health, what's the constitutional remedy? Whether state is bound to provide compensation?
What I want to say, Pankaj, is that whenever our fundamental right is infringed or whenever it is breached, there are two remedies that are available under Article 226 and Article 32. Means this is the only right, means fundamental right is the only right where we can directly move to the Honorable Supreme Court also, because the duty has been cast upon the state to take care of our fundamental rights. So we can move to the High Court, we can move to the Supreme Court, but it will be better to move to the High Court first.
Thank you, sir. I request if any attendee wants to ask a question directly to sir, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. We'll give you 30 seconds for this. And then if there's no hand raised, then we'll proceed towards vote of thanks. So if any participant wants to interact with sir, in case you think your question has not been answered, so you can raise your hand. Okay, so I now pass on the virtual mic to my colleague, Professor Alisha Thomas, to propose a vote of thanks to sir.
Good afternoon to all. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this FDP session. I, Professor Alisha Thomas, on behalf of Prestige Institute of Management and Research, Department of Law, first and foremost thank our special guest, Dr. Anand Paliwal, who despite of his busy schedule, has found time for this FDP session. Thank you for enlightening us, sir. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to you, sir, for your immense contribution to this FDP and also for your acknowledgement to our invitation. Thank you for the interactive and informative session. I also thank all the participants present here for attending our today's session. This FDP would not have been possible without the constant support of in charge Department of Law, PIMR, Dr. Nishant Joshi, and the tremendous efforts by the FDP Organizing Committee, Professor Gopal Kag and Professor Sayagi Bandi. I would also like to thank Professor Swati Rai and Professor Nakul Singh Chauhan for hosting and moderating this FDP. Once again, thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for being here with us. We'll be ending the meeting now, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.